Daddy, do you think God is sad when someone is alone? Sterling's voice broke through the room like a whisper that thundered. Patrick Mahomes froze, halfway through handing a small box of crayons to a boy sitting across the table. Around them, the community center buzzed with gentle chatter, folding chairs, scraping, children laughing softly, and volunteers trying to keep things light. But her question shattered the rhythm like a skipped heartbeat. He turned to her slowly, unsure if he had heard her correctly. Sterling stood beside him, her tiny hands still clutching a soft stuffed bunny they had brought from home. Her curls were slightly frizzy from the Texas humidity, and her bright eyes were locked on a little girl sitting alone in the corner, hands folded, eyes low. No one laughed. No one spoke. Sterling repeated it, quieter this time. Is he, Patrick? Blinked. This was supposed to be a normal family event, something good they could do together. His wife, Brittany, had organized a day of art, games, and food for children from local shelters and foster programs. Patrick had come as a dad, not a celebrity. He wore jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a smile that tried to hide the exhaustion of another long NFL season. But nothing had prepared him for this. The silence was deafening. A woman nearby lowered her phone. One of the volunteers stopped arranging juice boxes and stared. Even the kids paused, sensing something important had just happened. Sterling hadn't meant to be dramatic. She didn't know what impact her question had. She had only seen what no one else wanted to look at too long. That little girl. Quiet and unnoticed. Patrick crouched beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. Why do you ask that, sweetie? Sterling leaned in close. Because no one talked to her yet. And she looks like she's trying not to cry. It was such a simple observation, one any adult could have made. But none of them had. Not Patrick, not Brittany, not the volunteers. They had been moving through the motions, doing good things without looking too deep. Patrick looked toward the girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her dress was too big for her small frame. She held a bracelet tightly in one hand and stared down at the floor. Something clenched in his chest. He stood and gently took Sterling's hand. Do you want to go say hi together? She nodded without hesitation. Together they crossed the room. The girl noticed them coming and stiffened. Patrick knelt so he was eye level. Hi, my name's Patrick, and this is my daughter Sterling. Can we sit with you? The girl didn't answer, but her eyes flicked to Sterling, who gave her a small smile and held out the bunny. You can hold him if you want. He's not scared of anything. Slowly, the girl reached out, fingers brushing the worn fabric. She didn't speak, but her shoulders dropped slightly, and she didn't pull away. Patrick watched the 2 children for a moment, then looked up and saw Brittany standing across the room. She wasn't moving. Her hand was over her mouth, eyes shining. Behind her, a few other adults were whispering quietly, some wiping at the corners of their eyes. He hadn't come here looking for meaning. He thought he was just showing up. But now, something in his daughter's words had opened a door he hadn't known was locked. It wasn't about fame or football or foundation work. It was about presence. Real, uncomfortable, honest presence. Later. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house had quieted down, Patrick sat alone in the living room, scrolling through photos from the day. Most of them were cheerful. Kids smiling with painted faces, Brittany posing beside decorated cupcakes, volunteers laughing, but one stood out. It was a candid shot someone had taken of Sterling sitting next to the girl from the shelter. The bunny was in the girl's lap, and both children were quiet, not smiling. Just there. Together. He stared at it for a long time. Brittany came in and sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You okay?" "I don't think I've ever felt something hit me like that before," he said, voice low. She has a way of cutting through the noise. She didn't learn that from me. Brittany smiled. Maybe not. But you were the one who followed her lead. He looked at the photo again. Do you think God is sad when someone's alone? Brittany was quiet for a moment. I think God sends people like Sterling to make sure they're not. Patrick nodded slowly. It wasn't the kind of answer that would end up in a press conference, but it was the one he needed. He closed the photo app, leaned back, and looked up at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he didn't feel like he was running. Not from pressure, not from schedules, not from expectations. He was just still. And in that stillness, Sterling's voice echoed again in his mind. Unfiltered, innocent, powerful. Do you think God is sad when someone is alone? He didn't have the perfect answer. But tomorrow, he would ask that girl if she wanted to come over and draw. Not for a photo, not for a foundation, just because Sterling saw her. And that was enough. The question followed him all through the next day, while tying his shoes, pouring cereal for Sterling, answering texts from his trainer. Patrick kept hearing it in his head. Not her words, exactly. Not even her tone. But the weight behind it. The stillness that came after. He had heard a lot of questions in his life. From reporters, from fans, from coaches. But this one came from someone who couldn't even tie her own shoes properly yet. And still, it hit deeper than anything he'd heard in recent memory. He glanced at Sterling, who was now in the living room coloring a rainbow over a cardboard cutout of a house. The stuffed bunny lay on the carpet beside her, a bit more worn around the ears after yesterday's adventure. She hummed to herself, unaware that her question had cracked something open in her father. Patrick stared at her for a moment. Then, without a word, he grabbed his phone and sent a message to Brittany. Can you find out the name of that little girl from yesterday? A few minutes later, she responded. Her name's Layla, 6 years old. She's been in the system since she was 3. Patrick stared at the screen. 3. Sterling had just turned 4. He tried to imagine her being dropped into a world of strangers at that age. No parents, no soft bed, no morning pancakes or nighttime stories. Just unfamiliar. Faces and cold institutional routines. He felt a tightness in his chest. He needed to do something, but he didn't know what. He wasn't trying to be a savior. He hated that word. But yesterday, his daughter had seen someone no one else did. And now, he couldn't stop seeing her either. Later that afternoon, he walked into Sterling's room, where she was lining up crayons like soldiers on the edge of her bed. Hey, Ster, remember Layla, the girl you gave your bunny to? Sterling nodded. She liked him. Patrick smiled. She really did. I was thinking, would you want to invite her over sometime? Maybe we could all draw pictures, or make cookies. Sterling looked up with surprise. She can come here? If her caretakers say yes. Sterling didn't answer. She just lit up in a way that made Patrick's stomach twist. Like it was the most exciting thing she had heard all week. Like it was normal to invite a child from a shelter into your home. He stepped out of the room and texted Brittany again. Can we set it up? Maybe something small. No press. Just them. Already working on it, she replied. 3 days later, Layla arrived. She didn't smile. She didn't speak much. Her caretaker explained that she tended to observe first, act later. Patrick understood that. He wasn't trying to impress her. He just wanted her to feel safe. Not special. Not pitied. Just safe. Sterling grabbed her hand like they were best friends already. No hesitance, no awkwardness. She pulled her toward the living room where cookies were waiting, and a stack of coloring books sat beside a tower of unused markers. Brittany watched from the kitchen, arms crossed gently, eyes alert. She had a mother's intuition, ready to step in if anything turned strange, but willing to let the moment breathe. Patrick sat on the carpet beside them, quietly. He wasn't in charge here. This was Sterling's world now, and he was just grateful to be a witness. They colored. Then they built a castle out of sofa pillows. Then they argued, gently, about whether the bunny should wear a cape or a crown. By the end of the afternoon, Layla's shoulders had dropped. Her voice came out in whispers, then grew louder. Her laugh, at one point, made Brittany stop what she was doing and look up, surprised. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when Layla seemed to drift away, lost in thought, hands tightening on the bunny, eyes dimming. But then Sterling would tug her sleeve or offer a cookie, and something would return. As they packed up, Layla stood quietly by the door, clutching the bunny again. She looked up at Patrick and spoke for the first time since she'd entered the house. "Do you think I'll get to keep him?" Patrick knelt. "If you want him, he's yours." She nodded slowly, then added, "Sterling said he's not scared of anything, but I think he was a little scared before, but not anymore." Patrick didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. He glanced at Sterling, who simply smiled, as if everything made sense. Layla turned to the door and left with her caretaker. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full. Like a room after music stops, and you're not sure whether to speak, or just sit with it a little longer. That night, Patrick lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She said the bunny was scared before. He whispered. Brittany, half asleep, murmured, "Maybe he was." I keep thinking, what if we'd never brought Sterling that day? What if she hadn't said anything? Brittany opened her eyes and looked at him. Then someone else would have to notice. "But the world has too many people pretending not to see." He nodded. "I want to see. From now on, I want to actually see." The next morning, Patrick was supposed to film a commercial. It was already on the calendar. Teams, contracts, image rights, all of it lined up. But as he poured Sterling her cereal, he looked at her messy curls and sleepy eyes and made a decision. He picked up his phone and called his agent. "Tell them I'm not coming today." Something more important came up. The agent's voice crackled with surprise. "Are you serious? You'll be breaching." "I'm serious," Patrick said, hanging up. He knelt beside Sterling and helped her fix her pajama shirt. "Want to draw again today?" he asked. "With Layla? Maybe next time. But today, just you and me." Sterling grinned and nodded. He didn't need a camera crew or a sponsor or a game-winning throw. He needed this. And slowly, he began to realize something. The most important. Questions in life don't come with answers. They come with people. People who are easy to miss. People like Layla. People like Sterling. And if you're lucky, if you really pay attention, you get to listen before the world drowns it all out. Patrick didn't expect the call. It came just after noon, while he was sitting on the floor building a puzzle with Sterling. The morning had passed quietly. No cameras, no emails, no training. Just a father and his daughter, trying to fit oddly shaped cardboard pieces into a picture of a sunflower field. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Unknown number. Local area code. He answered on instinct. "Hello? Mr. Mahomes?" The voice on the other end was cautious. Female. Tired, maybe. "My name is Carmen. I'm Layla's caseworker." Patrick sat up straighter. "Yes, of course. Is she okay?" "She's fine. More than fine, actually. I'm calling because something happened after she got back from your home." There was a pause, long enough for Patrick's heartbeat to climb into his throat. "She told me something that caught me completely off guard," Carmen continued. "She said she wanted to pray." Patrick blinked. "What?" "She's never done that before. Never talked about God. Never asked questions like that. But last night, she asked me if she could pray before bed." Patrick didn't speak. Carmen filled the silence. She said, "Sterling told me that God doesn't forget anyone, even the ones that feel invisible." The woman paused. "I'm not a religious person, Mr. Mahomes, but I've worked in this system for 15 years, and I've never heard Layla speak with that kind of hope." Patrick swallowed hard. "She said that?" "Yes, and she said it because your daughter told her." He looked over at Sterling, who was now humming quietly, focused on a corner piece that refused to fit. She had no idea what kind of ripple she'd set in motion, no clue that a few innocent words had reached past the walls of a weary system and into the soul of a little girl who didn't know what it meant to feel seen. Carmen continued, "I'm not calling to thank you. That's not why I do this. I just thought you should know. Words matter, even from 4-year-olds. Patrick let out a breath. "They especially do from 4-year-olds. They spoke a little longer, about logistics, about possibly organizing another visit. When he hung up, he didn't move for a long time. He watched Sterling finally snap the piece into place and cheer for herself. "Daddy, look, it fits." He smiled. "It does." That night, Patrick told Brittany about the call. She listened without interrupting, eyes wide, then soft, then full of tears. "She's going to change lives," Brittany whispered. "She already has." Later, after Sterling fell asleep, Patrick found himself alone in the hallway. He wandered to her bedroom door and watched her through the crack. She was curled up with her bunny, now permanently hers, even if it once belonged to someone else. He didn't realize he was crying until he wiped his cheek. He thought about all the moments in his life when the spotlight was blinding, when the stadiums roared, and the press hailed his name. But nothing had ever made him feel as human, as deeply humbled, as watching his daughter sit next to a girl no one else had noticed, and say something that relit the spark in her heart. Next morning, Patrick called Carmen again. "Do you think it would help if I talked to the shelter directly?" he asked. "Not for publicity, just to see if they need anything." Carmen paused. "Honestly, yes. They're understaffed, underfunded, and burned out." Patrick nodded. "Then let's not wait." That afternoon, he and Brittany drove across town. No media, no assistants, just them. The shelter building was older than he expected. Peeling, paint, a rusted swing set out front, and the faint smell of overcooked rice in the air. Inside, kids shuffled between rooms while a few overworked adults tried to keep order. The walls were covered in children's drawings, but some were taped over cracks in the drywall. Patrick and Brittany were shown to a small meeting room, where the director, a man named Tomas, greeted them with cautious gratitude. "We don't get visitors like you," he said. "Not unless there's a photo op." "There won't be one today," Patrick replied. Tomas nodded, visibly relieved. Over the next hour, they talked. About needs, about the kids, about what actually helped, and what only looked good on paper. And when they left, Patrick didn't write a check. He made a promise. "We'll be back next week, and we'll bring what you really need." That night, back at home, Patrick sat with Sterling on the porch as the sky turned a soft gray. She leaned against him, tired from the day. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Do you think Layla's bunny misses me?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe, but I think he's happy where he is." Sterling looked up at him. "Do you think God misses people too? Like, when they feel alone?" Patrick hesitated, then smiled. "I think God waits, quietly, and sends someone like you to remind people they're not forgotten." Sterling didn't respond. She just reached out and held his hand. He didn't need to say anything else. In that moment, there were no cameras, no headlines, just a father learning from his daughter how to love better. And somewhere, in a small room with cracked walls and a bunny that had seen two different lives, a little girl named Layla went to sleep with a whisper of hope in her chest and a belief, finally, that she mattered. Patrick stood still, phone pressed to his ear, heart pounding with a weight that felt unfamiliar. Carmen's voice, calm but shaken, echoed from the other end. "She asked me if you were her father." The words clung to the air. It had been less than 2 weeks since Layla first visited their home. 2 visits had followed, simple afternoons filled with crayons, cookies, and the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Sterling had taken her in without condition. Brittany had sat close, guiding gently. Patrick had been present, steady, quiet, and Layla had begun to speak. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to matter. Now, standing in the hallway with Sterling watching, cartoons in the background, Patrick felt his knees soften. "What did you say?" he asked. Carmen paused. "I told her you weren't. But then I asked why she thought that." Patrick didn't breathe. "She said you look at her the same way you look at Sterling, and that when you talk to her, it doesn't feel like pretending." That was all it took. Patrick closed his eyes. He'd always understood how football could break people. He never expected that a child's innocence could do the same, and rebuild him in the process. He whispered, "How do you answer that without breaking her heart?" "You already didn't," Carmen replied. "You did the opposite." Later, that evening, Patrick sat with Brittany on the couch, staring at nothing. The lights were low. Sterling had gone to bed early. The air was quiet, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Brittany finally asked, "Do you want to bring it up to her? Ask Layla?" Patrick rubbed his face with both hands. "What would that even mean? We can't fix her life. We can't just adopt someone because we want to heal her. That's not how this works." "No," Brittany said. "But maybe this isn't about fixing. Maybe it's about staying." He looked at her, really looked. "How do we stay without hurting her more?" "We show up again and again until she believes we're not going anywhere." He nodded slowly. That weekend, they invited Layla again. She arrived holding the bunny tighter than ever. She didn't speak much at first, but she didn't avoid eye contact either. Sterling ran to meet her. No formality, no hesitation. They disappeared into the hallway like sisters who'd grown up together. Brittany followed with snacks. Patrick stayed behind, sitting at the dining table, fingers steepled, thoughts loud. Tomas, the shelter director, had warned them gently last week. These kids don't trust easily. Don't build something you can't hold. Patrick had nodded. But now, he was beginning to wonder. What if he wanted to hold it? An hour later, As they sat on the floor watching Sterling and Layla make sock puppets, Layla suddenly turned and said, "Can I ask something?" Everyone froze. Brittany smiled. "Of course." Layla looked at Patrick. "Can I call you something?" Patrick tried to keep his face from breaking. "Sure," he said, his voice steady. "Can I call you Mr. Mahomes?" He blinked. That wasn't what he expected. He smiled. "Of course you can." She nodded and returned to her puppet. It took him a few seconds to understand the meaning. She was testing boundaries. She had wanted to call him Dad, but wasn't ready. So she chose a name formal enough to feel safe, but personal enough to start closing the gap. Brittany saw it too. She reached over and gently squeezed his hand. That night, Patrick sat in Sterling's room as she dozed off. He looked at her peaceful face, her eyelashes twitching with dreams. Then he whispered something he hadn't dared say until that moment. "I think I want to be in her life." The words hung in the dark like a prayer. Over the next few weeks, things moved forward slowly, carefully. The family met with counselors. Carmen guided them through steps. Paperwork began. Not adoption. Not yet. Just permission for regular visits. More contact, more presence, more trust. Each meeting with Layla added another thread to the tapestry. She started talking more, asking questions, smiling sometimes. And occasionally, she would sit close to Patrick. Not always. But when she did, it felt natural. Like her small body was trying to remember something it had never really had. One afternoon, after Sterling had run outside to chase bubbles, Layla stayed behind in the kitchen. Patrick washed dishes while she sipped juice at the counter. Out of nowhere, she said, "I had a dream that I lived here." Patrick turned the water off. "What was it like?" "I had a room with a blanket that smelled like cookies, and Sterling had stickers on the wall. And you—" She stopped. He waited. "You were reading a book, and you didn't stop when I walked in. You just said, 'Come sit.'" He swallowed. "Sounds like a nice dream." She looked at him. It didn't feel like a dream. That was when he knew. It wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about what the law would eventually call him. It was about showing her that someone could stay. Not perfectly, not with all the answers, but with presence, with gentleness, with the kind of love that doesn't ask to be noticed, just chosen. Later that night, Brittany sat beside him on the porch. "She's different," she said softly. "She's healing," Patrick replied, "and so am I." They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. In the house behind them, two girls were giggling over stickers and whispering secrets that didn't need adult approval. And in Patrick's heart, something had changed. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't building toward a goal. He was simply standing still, rooted, grounded, and quietly grateful. The sky was gray that morning, but no one noticed. Not Sterling, who was busy choosing which headband to wear. Not Brittany, calmly packing a backpack with colored pencils and apple slices. Not Patrick, standing at the doorway, watching Layla's car pull up slowly at the curb. This wasn't just another visit. It had been nearly 2 months since the first day Sterling asked that question about God, since a bunny changed hands, since a child who barely spoke asked if she could pray. And today, something would shift again. Carmen stepped out of the car first. Her face said everything: careful optimism, measured emotion, a silent warning. This matters more than you think. Then Layla appeared. She held the bunny against her chest like always, but this time she stepped out without being asked. She scanned the front porch, and when she saw Patrick, she didn't hesitate. She waved. He waved back. Sterling ran out, barefoot, already yelling her name, already grabbing her hand like they were late to something important, like the world needed. Catching up. Inside, the house was the same as always, quiet, warm, open. But today felt different, and Layla felt it too. Later that afternoon, while the girls drew at the table and Brittany rearranged books in the living room, Carmen called Patrick into the kitchen. Her voice was low. She asked me again last night. Patrick didn't need. To ask what? She asked, if you're going to leave too. He leaned on the counter, eyes tired but steady. What did you say? I told her to ask you herself. Carmen left him with that, and Patrick stayed there for a moment, unsure of how to prepare for a question that didn't come from the mouth, but from a scar. A wound the world had left open in a 6-year-old girl. Minutes passed. Then, small footsteps entered the room. Layla stood in the doorway, bunny in one arm, hair a little tangled, eyes focused but unsure. Patrick smiled gently. Hey. She didn't respond at first, just looked at him, measured him, then softly, Can I ask you now? He nodded. You can ask me anything. Her hands tightened around the stuffed animal. Her voice came out almost too quiet to hear. Are you going to go away? Patrick didn't speak right away. He walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat. Can I tell you a story? He asked. She nodded. There was a girl, he began, who thought maybe the world forgot about her, that no one saw her, that maybe even God forgot. Layla looked at him, not blinking. But then, one day, she met someone who gave her a bunny, and said something that made everyone in the room stop and listen. And after that, everything changed. Not all at once, but a little at a time. He leaned forward. And the man who watched all that happen, he realized he didn't want to go back to the way things were. He didn't want to live without hearing her voice, or seeing her draw, or watching her become something no one expected. He took a breath. So, no, I'm not going away. Layla stared at him. Then, in a voice sharper than before, she asked, Even if I get mad sometimes? He smiled. Especially then. Even if I don't talk? Yes. Even if I ask to stay? He nodded. Layla stepped closer, just enough to touch the edge of his knee. Then, I want to. Patrick swallowed. You want to stay? She didn't answer with words. She just laid her head gently against his arm. Her bunny pressed between them. Her eyes closed. Later, after Carmen left with signed forms and the promise of official review, Patrick and Brittany sat on the back porch while the girls played inside. She said it, Patrick whispered. What? She said she wants to stay. Brittany reached for his hand. I heard. I didn't know I needed this, he said. That's how the best things come. That night, after the girls had brushed their teeth and argued about pajamas, Patrick knelt beside their beds. Sterling was already half asleep, bunnyless for the first time in months, because now it belonged to someone else. Layla was wide awake, eyes open in the dark. He started to rise, but she whispered, Wait. He paused. Can I ask one more thing? Always. She hesitated. Then, can I still talk to God, even if I don't know how? Patrick smiled. You just did. She blinked. That's it? She asked. That's it. A long pause. Then, do you think he hears me? Patrick reached out and gently brushed her hair back. I think he never stopped. She rolled onto her side, closed her eyes, and whispered something too soft to catch. But Patrick didn't need to hear it. He already knew. She believed now, not just in God, but in something just as holy, that someone would stay, that she mattered, that love could come quiet, steady, and real. He stepped out of the room, heart full in a way no championship ring had ever filled it. And somewhere behind him, two little girls fell asleep. One who had always belonged, and one who just learned she did too.